Let me introduce myself first. I'm Nancy Barnes. I'm the executive editor of the newsroom, and I want to welcome all of our distinguished guests, readers, and residents to our symposium on Greater Houston After Harvey. Here at the Houston Chronicle, we sometimes point fingers at some of the things that are going wrong in the community, but we also think that it's critical to our role as a public service organization to help find solutions too. And so tonight we want to focus on what I think is really the existential questions for Houston. How do we find a way to solve the relentless flooding that we've seen here the last 3 years, and especially after Harvey? How can we build a resilient city for the future which will allow us to thrive? We have a number of distinguished guests and panelists. We would like for you to participate too. There's a very, very short Q&A on your seats. If you would fill that out as we go along to tell us whether you're gaining insight from this discussion, that would be very helpful. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff Cohen, the executive editor of the editorial pages, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Nancy. I don't often reveal my sources, but when it comes to forming thoughts on the issue of flooding or the environment for the past 15 years or so, my first or certainly the second call goes to our keynote speaker. He is right up there at the top of my contact list. Jim Blackburn's bio says that he is the co-director of the Rice University SPEED Center. I say, though, that he is the dean of environmental thought in this area. There is no one who thinks about the environment as deeply as he does. If it has to do with protecting the coast or the air or the birds or the oysters, he's usually the person out there suing somebody. But what I have found over the past few years, that he's laying off the lawsuits and he is figuring out that there is more power in gathering people together to come together to fight for what is right and to stand up for causes like flood mitigation. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him up here and say that we could not have found a better person to kick off this discussion tonight.
Does this microphone work? Can you hear okay? Yep. Good. And I'm going to wander around a little bit, and I want to talk about flooding, obviously, but I think it's really more than that. I think it's about the future of the city of Houston. I think it's about kind of not so much who we've been, but who we both can be and who we should become. With any flooding conversation, the topic of money always comes up. And so I want us to talk about money tonight. I have found I can talk ecology with anybody in town if I talk about money in ecology. So certainly that ought to be the case with flooding. And I think we ought to have a really serious conversation. Now I want to just raise one time and one time only some of the things from the past. And this is really about priorities in the community. I was involved in litigation involving both the Grand Parkway and Addicts and Barker long before Harvey came along. And every politician in this part of the world was in favor of the Grand Parkway being built, and virtually no one was concerned about Addicts and Barker and the fact that in 2009 they were designated 2 of the 6 most dangerous reservoirs in the United States. We've known that since 2009, and basically as a community did not get that problem fixed. Yet we built a Grand Parkway for new people. So my starting commentary is, we spent a lot of time in the past focused on people who are not here yet. I think it's time that we focused on the people that are here and taking care of those of us that are here and taking care of our problems that we have now before we worry so much about solving problems for those that have not yet arrived. Oh, there it is. There it went. Now, I think one thing I have not heard in a lot of the conversation is the feeling of urgency that I have about where we are at the current time with flooding. You think about major cities in the United States and the struggles that they went through to get where they are. In Chicago in the fire of 1871, I think. San Francisco in the earthquake of 1906. And those towns have certainly thrived in spite of that. With us, it's flooding. This is a preliminary map by FEMA of the damage pattern associated with flooding. You can see Cypress Creek, Cypress Creek up in here, you've got Buffalo Bayou here, you've got Braze here, White Oak, Halls, Greens. You can follow all the different water courses with those patterns. It's just like a burn pattern, except it's a flood pattern. But this isn't the first time we've had that. This is a flooding pattern from Allison. This is back in 2001. 74,000 residences flooded. This is a flooding from the tax day storm, 2016. Again, a pattern of ruin, a pattern of destruction. And it's a series of events that we really haven't seemed to learn from. It seems to me there's a lesson there that we ought to be looking for different ways of solving the problems than what we were looking for. When you try something and you keep doing it and it hasn't worked, why do we think doing the same thing over and over again is going to be the solution? Business disruption is something I really, not heard talked about as much as it's kind of been on my mind. We've had buildings that are flooded that were inoperable. BP's trading floor was shut down. As an oil company, you can't have your trading floor shut down. We had workers that are flooded. We had refineries and chemical companies that couldn't come back online, not because they were flooded, but because their workers couldn't get to the refineries and chemical plants. Mobility in this town was absolutely disrupted. When's this going to happen again? We need a comprehensive transportation assessment relative to potential floods. And this is going to relate to something else I'm going to talk about, which is the 100-year flood, which is frankly obsolete as it's currently mapped in Houston. It is not useful. If anything, it's a negative. We are the 48th largest economy in the world. We're just behind Bangladesh, Beijing. We're ahead of Belgium. We're ahead of Switzerland, Royal Dutch Shell. Almost $500 million economy here in Houston. I'm not sure we actually act like we're a $500 billion economy. I'm not sure we think like a $500 billion economy. And I think that if we don't start thinking that way, we will not continue to be a $500 billion plus economy. Nothing less than the economic future of this region is on the line of getting this right. Now, here's a quiz. Can anybody identify this map? This is a map of your governmental structure. Yellow is the city of Houston, white are some of the smaller cities around, and the purples are the utility districts that are all around the unincorporated area or within the unincorporated area of Harris County. So our government is a city that doesn't have a city manager, a county that is relatively weak in terms of the powers and authorities that it has, and a group of utility districts that are really not designed for municipal government. They're designed to build things and to basically bring development into existence, but really aren't designed for managing over the long term much of anything. That's our governmental structure that's running a $500 billion ship. And I think that it needs to be questioned seriously. Now, let's talk about money. Governor Abbott, $60 billion. Please, feds, send $60 billion. Trump administration's response, $44 billion for Harvey, Maria, and Irma. We're going to be lucky if we see anything close to 10 billion total. Probably less. We need to focus on what's real. We're not going to get all that money. It's not going to be a problem that's solved with money. It's going to be a problem that's solved with intelligence and creative thinking. We have to be smart about project selection. We have to demand accountability, and this cannot be business as usual. So, I think it's reasonable, and I haven't really heard anybody focus. What can we do without a lot of money? What can we do that would be effective, that would bring real change, and doesn't require an incredible amount of money? Well, first of all, we can be honest and transparent. Our government is not transparent. I mean, with all due respect, Judge Emmons up here, and the county approves more things faster than any governmental body I've ever seen. And you approved a 500-year floodplain ordinance that I'm very proud of you for doing, but I don't think we've talked about it publicly ever before you voted on it. And I think that we've got to trust the public to get involved in this discussion. And if I was going to urge one major change, is to trust the public and get the public involved in the decision-making process and involve us all in the decisions that are being made. I think we have to be honest about the floodplain. Harris County made a big step forward with that, with adopting the 500-year floodplain. The city has not done that yet. These are steps that we need to take, but I think we need to be honest with people that are deep in the 100-year floodplain. There's some people we may never be able to protect. And I think we got to be honest about that. Off the charts. This is the Flood Control District's report on Allison. Now, I have to tell you, there's one thing I have had people say, Blackburn, you're doing really good in what you're talking about. Please don't talk about climate change. But of course I have to. We got to be honest about the fact that our rainfall amounts are increasing. And we can call it the new norm. You can call it weird weather, which is Texas code for climate change. But our climate's changing. And the sooner we get honest about it, the better chance we've got. If all we do is keeping up with the change, we're going to be behind every time. We've got to get in front of this issue. Look at these rainfall amounts. This is 12-hour rainfall totals for Tropical Storm Allison. 25 inches. Woo! That's like 2 feet of rain in 12 hours. Tax day flood. Harris County's analysis is a 10,000-year flood up in Waller County, or rainfall up in Waller County. 900, 900, 700, 600-year flood in portions of Harris County. Harvey, record breaking. This is a Chronicle image. You know, look at that pink. That's over 40 to 50 inches in 4 days. Record amounts of rainfall. There it is. This is from Jeff Lidner in Harris County Flood Control, showing 4 storms: Harvey in 2017, Allison in 2001, Tax Day flood, and the October 1994 flood. And these are what we currently consider our 100-year rainfall and our 500. 4-day rainfall, 500-year floods, 21 inches. 28, 35, 47. There's 3 500-year events for a 500-year flood. There's a 4th one up here. When you get up into these middle numbers, the Tax Day flood becomes a 500-year flood for a little shorter interval. We've had 4 500-year floods in 23 years. 1 every 6 years. That is spooky. That is truly scary. We're talking about doubling. 500-year rains, 21. Harvey, 47. We doubled the 500-year rainfall amount. This is at the edge of what is probable, and we doubled it. That is unprecedented. Our 100-year floodplain is obsolete. It is based on 13 inches of rain in 24 hours. That is simply no longer correct. And the sooner we admit it. Harris County has done that. They adopted the 500-year flood event. That was the wisest thing Harris County has done. And Judge Emmett, I applaud you gratefully for your leadership on that issue. That was a huge step. But what about the 100-year? We build all our roads to the 100-year. All of our hazardous waste is protected to the 100-year. Hazardous waste is at the state. The roads are at the highway department, they're at the county, they're at the city, and they're all too low. We need a map showing us which roads flood, when they flood, and when they're usable and not. I mean, anybody tried to drive down 288 in a big storm? You're not going very far. Not coming over Gray's Bayou. And by the way, on this, on this map, I'm going to stop there. I'll go forward. Going backwards with this is impossible. There's a lot of talk about a bond issue, possibly in May. It's being sold in the back rooms. It's being sold out of the public sight. I think that's a mistake. I think we've got to be highly transparent about everything that we do. And what I would tell you is that we need to know what we're spending money on. We don't have a lot of money. We're not going to get manna from the federal government like we think we are. We're not going to get manna from the state government. That rainy day image I had over there was just that. It's an image. You know, we're not getting the money from the feds or the state like we think we are. We're not going to have that much money at the state level. And we've got to use our local funds very, very wisely. I want to know why we're funding, what projects we're funding. I want to know what we're buying. And I want to know why we're buying. And that's a discussion I think all of us should have. So honesty and transparency, we can get that at no cost. We can get good information at no cost. Maybe. In terms of flooding, we have a 500-year floodplain map. For right now, I think it's the best information you can get about where the likely flood is. We have had flooding beyond the limits of the 500-year flooding. We've had rainfalls beyond the 500. But the 500 is sure a better indicator than the 100-year is right now. It's hard to imagine that we're in a position where we don't know where the flood level should be. But I will tell you that based on the type of rainfalls we're looking at, I don't think there's a city in the United States that knows where the right levels are. I don't think that these are problems we don't know how to solve yet. Harris County, in this case, by the way, the 500-year floodplain is about 34% of the county. Now, if you think that that's actually 1 in every 6 years that you're going to see that, then the real safety edge is well beyond that 500-year boundary. I do not feel that that 500-year boundary is a safe boundary. I think the county said to go 2 feet above the 500-year. That is very wise information. Go ahead, I'm just going to tell you to move it forward, please. Now, this is my favorite information piece. This was a sign that was put up by Precinct 2 of Harris County down in the Bay Area. And it's near a big intersection. And it says, that's how high the flood's going to get with a Category 4 hurricane. And that's how high it's going to get with a Category 5 hurricane. And it was taken down. And what the story I heard was, the realtors came up and were complaining because it's really hard to sell houses with that sign up. And the answer is, yes, it is hard to sell houses. If people have good information, they make good decisions about where to live. We have been more concerned about selling real estate than protecting people. And I think that is the type of thing we've got to turn over, and transparency and honesty begins to get us there. Next slide. This just went live at 4 o'clock this afternoon. They asked me to change the title from Surviving Houston Flooding to Living With. Thought that was a little over the top with surviving. But this is intended to be a guide for citizens to help people make decisions about flooding and floodplains. It's a start. It is intended to be an evolving paper. And I'm asking everyone to read it and make suggestions on making it better. But the basic idea is we all need to learn how to live with flooding. This is a community that floods. We will flood. We've got to learn to live with flooding. We are not going to control flooding. And Judge, I would change the name of the flood control district to the flood management district. I think managing flooding makes a lot more difference than controlling flooding. Flood warnings. I think we need an excellent flood warning system. You know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but frankly, if we're worried about protecting people, we need to give people good information. We need to help people survive flooding. I mean, how many of you have seen, certainly on TV and on newspaper accounts, vehicles that have gone into an underpass, and the sign says 4 feet deep there? Why don't we have gates that come down and simply say, you can't go here? I think the Dutch have now raised their standard, by the way, from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 100,000 risk. We use 1 in 100, we've moved to 1 in 500 because our 1 in 100 is inadequate. But I think that my understanding of the Dutch is they say that if one person dies, it's too many. You know, people die in these underpasses, and we can protect people from that. Next slide. This is what Phil Bedian, who's the head of the SPEED Center over at Rice, prepared for the medical center. This is Hurricane Ike coming ashore in the top left. These are the rain bands coming through. These are essentially the triangles or the gauges on Brace Bayou, and this is a kind of running tally of both rainfall and flow. And this is used to tell the medical center when to shut down. And the medical center has flood proofing. They close up, they basically hunker down, and they tell the people that are not there, that are coming to work, don't come. The people that are there, stay. It was a private initiative done with private money. Harris County has some of this. I think that we can automate it. We can make it available to everyone so we would know the exact status of every bayou. And we'll know the status of where floods are coming and when they're coming. We may get it wrong every now and then. I would rather get it wrong than to not do it and not broadcast it. And it's a system, I think if all of us will have the right attitude about these things going forward, we can work as a community toward perfecting systems. But this has worked extremely well in the medical center. Next slide. But what about driving? What roads do we go to? Where are the passable roads when it rains? How many of you know how to get in and out of your house when it rains? How many of you know which are the better roads to go on? The ones that are less likely to flood. And if you know that about your neighborhood, that's great, because I think all of us should know that about our neighborhood. But what about the next neighborhood over or going across town? It would be wonderful if we could pick up an app and say, look, don't go down this street, don't go down this one, this one's looking pretty good right now. And to have that. This is just an image from a traffic warning system. Well, why couldn't we have a flood warning system like this? These are things that can be done for relatively low cost. Next slide. Regulation. Regulation is a low-cost alternative. Next slide. Harris County has already taken the first step on this. We ought to have everybody. City, the county, I'm interested to see if the county had overriding authority on the city within the city's jurisdiction if the city didn't adopt a 500-year flood level. Those are the types of things we ought to be probing and pushing. Again, hazardous waste. If we don't protect hazardous waste from the 500 years, I mean, the 100 years is like nothing. You all know that. Everybody in this room has chuckled at a 100-year flood happening again and again. The problem is we have a lot of infrastructure. It's important, I think, and I think I've heard Steve Costello talk about it as a proposal to remove grandfathering from the city of Houston. So many of our buildings and structures were built without any type of adequate detention. We may be able to retrofit that through various types of alternatives. That's regulation. We ought to look at it, and it ought to be comprehensive. And we ought to be looking at the 500-year level within the city. That's all. What else can be done? Private sector. The private sector is a resource that's here. I am really big on the private sector. I have a lot of faith in the private sector. But what's out there? Philanthropic community. Next slide, please. This is Christoph Spieler. He has been kind of elected to basically try to organize on behalf of Houston Endowments and Kinder Foundation and Mitchell Foundation and other funders, organize all this disparate group of researchers, by organization, SPEED Center included, but Kinder, Harvard Research, LISP, TSU, U of A. All of us are Christoph's trying to herd us together and get us to operate, but it's basically free labor that's out there to be used on anything that might be of interest on flooding. This isn't the usual group of government